The multiverse theory, the idea that there could be multiple Earths out there, is quite an intriguing one for scientists. But if such a theory were to be proven, how would it affect the average citizen? All the Myriad Ways by Larry Niven. Read by Karl. There were timelines branching and branching, a mega universe of universes, billions more every minute. Billions? Trillions? Trimble didn't understand the theory, although God knows he tried. The universe split every time someone made a decision. Split so that every decision made could go both ways. Every choice made by every man, woman, and child on Earth was reversed in the universe next door. It was enough to confuse any citizen, let alone Detective Lieutenant Gene Trimble, who had other problems. Senseless suicides, senseless crimes. A citywide epidemic. It hit other cities too. Trimble suspects it was worldwide, but other nations were simply keeping it quiet. Trimble's sad eyes focused on the clock. Quitting time. He still have to go home and slowly sat down again, for he had his teeth in a problem and he couldn't let go. Not that it was really commenting on anything, but if he left now, he'd only have to take it up again tomorrow. Go or stay. And the branching began again. Gene Trimble thought of other universes parallel to this one, and a parallel gene in each one. Some have left dirty. Many have left on time or are now halfway home. Out to a movie, watching a strip show, racing to the scene of another death. Streaming out of police headquarters in all their multitudes, leaving a multitude of Trimbles behind them. Each is trying to deal alone with the city's endless, inexplicable parade of suicides. Gene Trimble spread the morning paper on his desk. When a drawn drawer took his gun equipment on his .45, he began to take the gun apart. The gun was old but serviceable. He never fired it except on a target range, and never expected to. To Trimble, cleaning his gun was like knitting. Way to keep his hands busy while his mind wandered off. Turn the screws, don't lose them. Lay the parts on an order. Through the closed door to his office came the sounds of men hurrying. Another emergency. The department couldn't handle it all. Too many suicides, too many casual murders, not enough men. Gun, oiled rag, white beach part, put it back in place. Why would a man like Ambrose Harmon go off a building? In the early morning light he lay, more stained than a man, 36 stories below the edge of his own penthouse roof. The pavement was splattered red for yards around him. The stains were still wet. Harmon landed on his face. He wore a bright silk dressing gown and a sleeping jacket with a sash. Others would take samples of his blood, to learn if he had acted on the influence of alcohol or drugs. There was little to be learned from seeing him in his present condition. But why was he up so early, Trimble wondered, for the call had come in at 8:03, just as Trimble arrived at headquarters. So late, you mean? Bentley had beaten him to the scene by 20 minutes. We called some of his friends. He was there an all-night poker game. Woke up around 6 o'clock. Did Herman lose? Nope. He won almost $500. That fits, Trimble said in disgust. No suicide note? Maybe they found one. Should we go up and see? We won't find a note, Trimble predicted. Even 3 months earlier, Trimble would have thought, how incredible, or who could have pushed him? Now running up the elevator, he knew not only reporters. For Ambrose Harmon was news. Even among this past year's epidemic of suicides, Ambrose Harmon's death would stand out like Lyndon Johnson in the lineup. He was a prominent member of the community, a man of dead and wealthy grandparents. Perhaps the huge inheritance, 4 years ago, had gone to his head. He had invested tremendous sums to back harebrained causes. Now, because one of those causes paid off, he was richer than ever. The Crosstime Corporation already held a score of patents on inventions imported from alternate time tracks. Already those inventions had started more than one industrial revolution, and Harmon was the money behind Crosstime. He would have been the world's next billionaire had he not walked off his balcony. They found a roomy, luxuriously furnished apartment in good order, and a bed turned out for the night. The only sign of disorder was the clothing. Slacks, sweater, silk turtleneck shirt, knee-length shoe socks, no underwear, piled on a chair in the bedroom. The toothbrush had been used. He got ready for bed, Trimble thought. He brushed his teeth and then went to look out at the sunrise. A man who kept late hours like that, you wouldn't see the sunrise very often. He watched it. When it was over, he jumped. Why? They were all like that. Easy, spontaneous decisions. The victims' killers walked off bridges or stepped from their balconies or suddenly flung themselves in front of subway trains. They sold halfway across the freeway or swallowed a full bottle of laudanum. None of the methods showed previous planning. Whatever was used, the victim had it all along. Never actually went out and bought a suicide weapon. The victims really dressed for the occasion and used makeup, as an ordinary suicide would. Usually there was no note. Harmon fit the pattern perfectly. Like Richard Corey said mentally. Who? Richard Corey, the man who had everything. And Richard Corey, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. You know what I think? If you got an idea, let's have it. Suicide all started about a month after Cross Time got started. I think one of the Cross Time ships brought back a new bug from some alternate timeline. A suicide bug? Bentley noted. You're out of your mind. I don't think so, Gene. Do you know how many Cross Time pilots have killed themselves in the last year? More than 20%. Oh? Look at the records. Cross Time has about 20 vehicles in action now, but in the past year they've employed 62 pilots. 3 disappeared, 15 are dead, and all but 2 died by suicide. I didn't know that. Trimble was shaken. It was bound to happen sometime. Look at all the worlds they've found so far. The Nazi world, the Red Chinese world, half bombed to death. The ones that were so totally bombed that Cross Time Canada figured out who did it. The one with the Black Plague mutation, and no penicillin until Cross Time came along. Sooner or later. Maybe. I don't buy your bug, though. Suicide's a new kind of plague lit up with the other crimes. Same bug. Uh-huh. But I think we'll check up on Cross Time. Trimble's hands finished with the gun laid on his desk. He was hardly aware of it. Somewhere in the back of his mind was a parting sensation. The handle. The piece he needed to solve the puzzle. He spent most of the day studying Cross Time Inc. News stories, visual handouts, personal interviews. The incredible suicide rate among Cross Time pilots could not be coincidence. I wonder why nobody had noticed it before. It was slow going. With Cross Time travel, as with relativity, he had a throwaway reason and use only logic. Trimble had sweated it out. Even the day's murders had not distracted him. They were typical of a piece with the preceding 8 months crime wave. A man in short of foreman with a gun bought an hour earlier, then strolled off towards police headquarters. A woman had moved to the back row of a dark theater, using an ice pick to stab members of the audience to the back of their seats. She'd chosen only young men. They had killed without heat, without concealment. They had surrendered without fear or bravado. Perhaps it was another kind of suicide. Time for coffee, Trimble thought, responding unconsciously to dry throat, plus a muddiness in the mouth, plus slight fatigue. He set his hands to stand up, and the image came to him of an endless row of Trimbles, lined up the repeated image in facing mirrors. But each image was slightly different. He would go get the coffee, and he wouldn't, and he would send somebody for it, and someone was about to bring it without being asked. Some of the images were drinking coffee, a few had tea or milk, some were smoking, some were leaning too far back with their feet on their desks. A handful of these were toppling helplessly backward. Some were, like this present Trimble, introspecting with their elbows on the desk. Damn Cross Time, anyway. He'd have had to check Harmon's business affairs even without the Cross Time link. There may have been a motive there for suicide or for murder, though it had never been likely. In the first place, Harmon had cared nothing for money. Cross Time grew up into one of many. At the time, the project looked as harebrained as the rest. A handful of engineers and physicists and philosophers determined to prove the theory of alternate time tracks was reality. In the second place, Harmon had no business worries. Quite the contrary. 11 months ago, an experimental vehicle touched one of the worlds of the Confederate States of America and returned. The universe and alternate choice were within reach, and the pilot had brought back an artifact. From that point on, cross-time travel had more than financed itself. The Confederate world's stapler, granted the meeting patent, had bought 2 more ships. A dozen miracles that originated in a single technologically advanced timeline, one in which the catastrophic Cuban War had been nothing more than a wet firecracker. Lasers, oxygen hydrogen rocket motors, computers, seeds, plastics, the list was still growing. And Cross-Time held all of the patents. In the first months, the vehicles had gone off practically at random. Now the pinpointing was better. Vehicles could select any branch they preferred. Imperial Russia, Amerindian America, the Catholic Empire, the Dead Worlds. Some of the Dead Worlds were hells of radioactive dust and intact but deadly artifacts. From these worlds, Cross-Time pilots brought strange and beautiful works of art, which had to be stored behind lidded glass. The latest vehicles could reach worlds so like this that it took a week of research to find a difference. In theory, they could get even closer. There was a phenomenon called the broadening of the bands. That again trembled the shivers. When a vehicle left its own present, a signal went on in the hangar, a signal unique to that ship. When the pilot wanted returned, he simply cruised across the appropriate band of probabilities until he found the signal. The signal marked his own unique present. Only it didn't. The pilot always returned to find a clump of seagulls, a broadened band. The longer he stayed away, the broader was the signal band. His own world and casino just divided after his departure, and a constant stream of decisions being made both ways. Usually it didn't matter. Any signal the pilot chose represented the world he left. Since the pilot himself had a choice, he naturally returned to them all. But there was a pilot by the name of Gary Wilcox. He would use his vehicle for experiments, see how close he could get to his own timeline and still leave it. Once, last month, he'd returned twice. Two Gary Wilcoxes, one vehicle. The vehicles have been wrecked, their hulls intersected. For the Wilcoxes, it could have been sticky for Wilcox and wife and family. But one of the duplicates had chosen to die almost immediately. Trimble had tried to call the other Gary Wilcox. He was too late. Wilcox was going skydiving a week ago. He neglected to open his parachute. Small wonder, thought Trimble. Miss Wilcox had motive. It was bad enough knowing all about the other Trimbles, the ones who had gone home, the ones drinking coffee, etc. But suppose someone walked in the office right now and it was Jean Trimble. It could happen. Convinced was that Cross Time was involved in the suicides. Trimble, some other Trimble, might have easily decided to take a trip in a Cross Time vehicle. A short trip. He could land here. Trimble closed his eyes and rubbed the corners of his fingertips. In some other timeline, very close, someone thought to bring him coffee. Too bad this wasn't it. Didn't do too much to think about these alternate timelines. There were too many of them. The other ones, close ones, could drive you buggy, but the ones further off were just as bad. Take the Cuba War. Atomics had been used here. Now Cuba was uninhabited, and some American cities forgotten, and some Russian. Could have been worse. Why wasn't it? How did we luck out? Intelligent statesmen? Faulty bombs? The humane reluctance to kill indiscriminately? No, there was no luck anywhere. Every decision was made both ways. For every wise choice you bled your heart out over, you made all the other choices too. So it went, all through history. Civil wars unfought in some of the worlds were won by either side and others. Elsewhere, another animal had first done murder with an entomopher. Some wars were still all nomad. Civilization lost out. If every choice was cancelled elsewhere, why make a decision at all? Trimble opened his eyes and saw the gun. The gun, too, was endlessly repeated on endless desks. Some of the images were dirty with years of neglect. Some smelled of gunpowder, fired recently, a few at living targets. Some were loaded. All were as real as this one. A number of these were about to go by accident. A proportion of these were pointed, in deadly coincidence, at Jean Trimble. Seeing the endless row of Jean Trimbles, all at his desk. Some were bleeding and cursing as men run into the room following the sound of a gunshot. Many are already dead. Was there a bullet in there? Nonsense. He looked away. The gun was empty. Trimble loaded it. At the base of his mind he felt the touch of the handle. He would find what he was seeking. Put the gun back on his desk, pointing away from him, when the thought of Ambrose Harmon coming home from a late night. Ambrose Harmon, who had won $500 at poker. Ambrose Harmon, exhausted, seeing the lightening sky as he prepared for bed, going out to watch the dawn. Ambrose Harmon, watching the slow dawn, remembering a $2,000 pot. He'd bluffed. In some other branching timeline, he'd lost. Thinking of some other branching timeline, $2,000 included his last dime. It was certainly possible. If Cross Time hadn't paid off, he might have gone through the remains of his fortune in the last 4 years. He liked to gamble. Watching the dawn, thinking of all the Ambrose Harmons on that roof. Some were penniless this night, and he had not come out to watch the dawn. Well, why not? If he stepped over the edge, here and now, another Ambrose Harmon would only laugh and go inside. If he laughed and went inside, the other Ambrose Harmons would fall to their deaths. Some were already on the way down. One changed his mind too late, another laughed as he fell. Well, why not? Trimble thought of another man, a non-entity, passing a firearms store. Branching of times, he thinks, looking in, he thinks of the man who took his fireman's job. Well, why not? Trimble thought of a lonely woman making herself a drink at 3 in the afternoon. She thinks of myriads of alter egos, with husbands, lovers, children, friends. Unbearable to think all of them might have been so as real as yourself, as real as his ice pick in her hand. Well, why not? And she goes out to a movie, but she takes the ice pick. And the honest edition with a carefully submerged urge to commit rape, just once. Reading his newspaper at breakfast, and there's another story from Cross Time. They found the world line in which Kennedy the First was assassinated. Strolling down the street, he thinks the world was infinite branchings of alter egos already dead, or jailed, or president. A girl in a miniskirt passes, she has nice legs. Well, why not? Casual murder, casual suicide, casual crime. Why not? If alternate universes are reality, then cause and effect are an illusion. Law of averages is a fraud. You can do anything, one if you will, or did. Gene Trimble looked at the Queen and loaded gun on his desk. Well, why not? And he ran out of the office shouting, Bethany, listen, I've got the answer. And he stood up slowly and left the office shaking his head. This was the answer, and it wasn't any good. Suicides, murders, casual crimes will continue. And he suddenly laughed and stood up. Ridiculous. Nobody dies for a philosophical point. And he reached for the intercom and told the man usher to bring up a sandwich and some coffee, and picked the gun off the newspapers, looked at it for a moment, and dropped it in the drawer. His hands began to shake. On a world line very close to this one, and he picked the gun up off the newspaper, put it to his head, and fired. The hammer fell in an empty chamber. Fired. The gun jerked up and blasted a hole in the ceiling. Fired. The bullet tore a furrow in his scalp. Took off the top of his head. The end.